When I look at the USC Trojans and I look at the Washington Huskies right now, I look at their offense, I look at their skill positions, and I see some really good players out there. These are both offensive-minded head coaches. Of course, Lincoln Riley for USC and Jed Fish for the Huskies up there in Seattle. But both of these teams, a storyline I have for both of these teams entering spring practices, we need to bolster this offensive line so we can protect our offensive assets and so we can get the most out of our offensive assets. Let's start first with the Trojans down there in Los Angeles. Man, they are gaining a lot of momentum, certainly, this offseason. It didn't start off too hot with a lot of those players from that great recruiting class that Riley had in his first year entering the transfer portal, but they've certainly picked up a lot of confidence, certainly picked up a lot of momentum as we approach spring practice here in 2025. On the USC offensive line, they lost 3 starters. Now, you ask a lot of USC fans, they're probably not going to be sad losing Mason Murphy. But the other 2 guys on the interior at center and at guard, I think, are the 2 bigger losses for the Trojans right now. That being Jonah Monheim going to the NFL and Emmanuel Pranon transferring to Big Ten West Coast rival Oregon right now. Now, the Trojans did go out into the transfer portal, and they got 2 very good interior offensive linemen. 2 out of the top 13 ranked interior offensive linemen in the portal, according to 24/7 Sports. That being DJ Wingfield from Purdue, Gianre Reed also from Syracuse. So early in spring practice, it's going to be how are these guys going to be able to gel together, right? When you bring in transfers, sometimes it can be a little bit hit or miss, especially on a group that needs to be cohesive, like the offensive line. Over at left tackle, Elijah Page is someone had his ups and downs, certainly last season, but they're expecting him to really take a step up and be that guy that can certainly protect the quarterback, because you look at the skill positions right now for USC. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Jade Mayava, unlike maybe some other people right now in the national media. I think he was a little bit inconsistent. At his highs, he can look pretty good, but as his lows, he can throw 2 pick sixes against Notre Dame and cost him a football game, right? That's kind of how, and then you look at, they got a true freshman in Husan Longstreet in there as well. This is certainly not the peak of a Lincoln Riley quarterback situation at USC, but then you look, they might have one of the top wide receiver tandems in the Big Ten with Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon coming back. I think Eli Sanders transferring in at running back, you combine him with the Thunder that is Brian Jackson. I think there's certainly some things to work with there on the offensive side. But remember last year's offensive line, why Miller Moss became the backup quarterback. He got hit a lot. Now, maybe the sack numbers weren't as high, but there was a lot of pressure on Miller Moss throughout the season. He started to see ghosts a little bit. And if we start to get pressure, if we start to see the same things in 2025 with a guy like Jade Mayava that sometimes can struggle in reading a defense, then maybe that's not exactly a great combination for the USC Trojans right now. I think when I talk about USC, I'm big on 2026 and 2027 for them really hitting maybe a 9, 10, who knows how many victories that they can get. This year's got to be a little bit of a bridge year. Continue to show that progression at USC. Offensive line needs to be better in 2025 than it certainly was in 2024. I love Washington's skill positions. Buy stock in Demond Williams right now, the quarterback over there, a dual threat guy, and he is a great weapon. You saw what he could do in the Sun Bowl over there against Louisville. You need to protect Demond Williams, certainly at all costs. I love him. I love Jonah Coleman, a 1,000-yard running back that's returning to the Huskies this season. How about Denzel Boston? The team leader in touchdown grabs last season also had 834 yards. Amari Evans transferring in from Penn State, 415 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think those numbers could go up in a more pass-happy attack like the Washington Huskies and a more dynamic offense like the Washington Huskies, certainly right now. So we've established that the skill positions and Washington can be an explosive team, but Boy, this offensive line was one of the worst in the Big Ten. The defensive line wasn't great either, but I'm specifically talking about the offensive line here for the Huskies. Washington gave up 39 sacks last year. That was the most in the Big Ten. Look, they gave up 10 in the regular season finale to Oregon, but if you still take that away, they were still giving up 2.4 sacks per game, which would put them 93rd in college football. So this is a unit that if they want to get the most out of those great skill players, the offensive line needs to be able to block some of these Big Ten defensive lines over there. You lose a handful of starters, but you bring in a couple of transfers. Carver Willis from Kansas State, he's played a lot of good football on some good K-State offensive lines. Gerian Hatchett from Oklahoma, he actually started his career at Washington, played 8 games in that 2023 season, 13 games in 2022, so he's got a little bit of a familiar track record with Seattle, although a different coaching staff in there as well. Drew Azzopardi is coming back at one of the tackle spots on this offensive line. Look, they have to be better.